Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Game Decline series. So in this series we have covered so far some beautiful openings like the Tarrasch defense, semi-Tarrasch defense, Aragon's defense, Vienna variation of the Queen's Game Decline. We have seen the Chigorin defense, we have seen the Harvard's attack. We have seen so far really some beautiful openings that are possible after the first moves d4, d5 and then c4. Today we're starting a new opening. Today we're starting the so-called Albin Countergambit. The Albin Countergambit is this move order. First we play of course d4, and after move d5 and c4 we're playing the counter gambit in the center with the move e5, and this is now really sharp opening in my opinion. From black's perspective, it's an opening that you again should try to avoid. We have seen also in the Baltic defense recently that we have covered that this is not good. In my opinion, also the Albin counter gambit is something that you should try to avoid. Maybe, just maybe, as a surprise element you can use it sometimes. And in our intro video I wanted to show again this mortal trap that is possible. I think it's a so-called Lasker trap. The Lasker trap is a very popular trap that is possible in the Albin counter gambit. You have seen it probably many times on some other YouTube chess channels or maybe on some beautiful chess websites. In this video I'm going to introduce you the Lasker trap, but also with some potential sidelines, because your opponent can fall for the trap, which is very unpleasant for white. If white makes a couple of inaccuracies in the beginning, then basically the game is over for white. But still white can prolong the game in the Lasker trap, and then you have to know again what you're doing. So in this video we're doing only the Lasker trap, and then in the continuation of our series I'll introduce you also some different tactical shots, different traps that are possible in the Albin counter gambit. So let's see now what is the Lasker trap and how to play this opening a little bit from black's perspective. So let's see now this position. So after move e5 many times, and it's simply the best way here for white to play simply d takes e5. So nothing wrong with the move, and here many times black is continuing with the move d4, and that's the actual goal about here the Albin counter gambit, because what we want to do here from black's perspective is of course get a space advantage, which means now that we are trying probably to support our d4 pawn with the knight on c6, and then we want to do something like knight to e7, knight to g6 and maybe knight to e5. So we want to recapture the pawn, this gambit pawn, we want to take it back and then continue the game with a strategical advantage in the center, which is now this supported annoying pawn on d4. So this is something that black wants to get. Of course white has opportunities, so it's in my opinion still a bad opening for black. I'm not suggesting you that you should play the Albin counter gambit, but I still think that we should know about the common strategical ideas here. So that's why white needs to counterplay this, but there are many mistakes that white can make, and this is now the first mistake that we're seeing in this Albin counter gambit, which is now the move e3. And now comes the actual Lasker trap. It's a very popular trap. I think you have seen it millions and millions of times. After move e3, what we should not do is of course take here. Then of course after trades of queens on the d file, white will simply recapture the pawn on e3, and that's not the goal of this tactic. We should simply proceed with the normal bishop to b4. And now there are many problems that white is facing. Of course you cannot cover with the queen, basically you have to cover with the bishop, and now black plays a beautiful move d takes e3. The problem about this move is that actually bishop takes b4 is not possible. That's the beauty about the Lasker trap, because what we can do is play e takes f2. We're deflecting the king now from the defense of the queen. If you take of course, then the queen is lost on d1. That's the beauty about the trap. So that's why you have to play king to e2. But notice now, this is the beauty of the move. We have now a promotion, but you don't promote to a queen, you promote to knight, which is very important. If you promote to queen here, then of course black will simply get challenged with queen takes d8. After king takes d8, then of course we have here a rook takes g1, and white can get out of this mess. White I think has a solid game. So that's why we should promote to knight, because the knight comes with a check. That's the beauty about the Lasker trap. And now your opponent has to make a reaction. He has to play king to e1, because if he plays something else, of course he gets again deflected from the defense of the queen. So that's why king to e1, and now we're playing simply queen to h4, and from this point on basically the game is over. If your opponent is play something like g3, then of course queen to e4 comes with a check, and you lose also the rook. So whatever you do, it's game over. So you could try maybe king to d2, and I think it's now very important to play the next couple moves very correctly. If you play them correctly, then you have a completely winning game. White cannot get out of this mess. But if you make maybe 2 bad moves or something, then of course white could get out of this mess, will take probably the knight, and could have maybe a pleasant game. But what you should do is here, beautiful move, knight to c6, and this move is a preparation first of all to take out the bishop, is also preparation to control further these 2 squares, and this also preparation to play something like bishop to f5 and then queenside castling. So there are so many direct threats that black is playing here. Your opponent could try maybe here rook to g1, but it's not possible. We can play here queen to d4, and we can also take out the rook, so we can do many things. You could also try here bishop to g4. That's even probably slightly better. Then if your opponent covers, then we can play queenside castling, and again you see the queen gets trapped. Your opponent, you could also here try queen to h6 instead of bishop to g4. Whatever you do, basically it's simply good here for black. You could maybe play something like king to e1, but now with knight to b4 the game is also over here for white. So as I said, instead of this move rook to g1, white could also do maybe bishop to c3, could also maybe escape now with the bishop, but again it's not better, because again you get this one, bishop to g4, you have to step back, here you have to escape with the queen, but now again queenside castling is the beautiful dirty trap also here, because after king to c2, now knight to d4 is a possibility. After bishop to d4, we can simply take queen to e1. You see the bishop gets deflected from the defense of the queen. That's also very beautiful. You could also try maybe something like king to c1 after move knight to d4, but again it doesn't get better, because you get this one, queen to h6 again, and after bishop to d2 we have now this one, queen to g6. We're preparing now checkmate here on c2, so that's why you have to play something like knight to a3, but now with knight to e2, again knight to e2, the game is over. You have to sacrifice now the queen for the knight, and it's game over again for white here. So really beautiful tactics are possible. Maybe you will find even easier ideas. Many ideas are working for black, but notice that here after move bishop to b4, the game is already very messed up here for white. So bishop to d2 we have seen is not working because of this idea d takes e3. What white could do is maybe to cover himself with the knight, but still this is even not better, because you get simply d takes e3. After f takes e3 we can play always this beautiful check, and again you have to cover with g3, and we can play now queen to e4. White is pretty much forced to play something like knight to f3, and now with knight to c6 we have still a comfortable game. We have here the beautiful tension, and in one particular moment we'll take out this pawn, so too many structural weaknesses here. The e3 is weak, the e5 is weak, c4 is also weak, so it's not getting better here for white. So still black is much better in this position. So let's see now a different example what white could do after move e5, and here d takes e5, after move d4, again this mistake. So we're analyzing now in this video only this mistake, e3. Now again after bishop to b4, your opponent could try bishop to d2, and now after d takes e3, your opponent could try this one, queen to a4. Seems also tempting here, but don't worry, still white is losing here if you're playing the next couple moves in a good way, because you can cover yourself with knight to c6, and now if your opponent takes bishop to b4, now you have this one, e takes f2, and you have to make a reaction. For instance, if you don't react, if you play something like king to e2 here, the problem is now you get again this beauty, f takes g1 with the promotion of the knight, and now your opponent has to take, and then you play bishop to g4. You see the king has to move again. We play queen to d4 now with a double threat. Here the rook is hanging, also the pawn is hanging. If your opponent steps back here, if your opponent escapes with the rook, then even checkmate is possible, queen to e3, and now you have to cover yourself with the bishop, and it's game over. So you see this is also not working here after e takes f2. So as we said, king to e2 is simply not working. Your opponent has to take, but now we're playing queen to h4 again. If your opponent plays something like g3, now comes the beauty of this tactic. Again, queen to d4, you can see the position is really stretched here for white. White needs to escape, and now we can take out this pawn, and we'll eventually take the rook, and white is losing the game here for sure. So of course you have to worry about some things. Your opponent will probably activate his minor pieces, so don't mess up this position. It's a +2 evaluation here for for black. So of course, if you making this trap, of course you don't want to lose the game, so be careful. Then in the continuation of the game, escape with the queen and similar stuff, activate your pieces, secure the king, and I guarantee you'll have a comfortable game. So let's see now a different example. Again, the Albin Countergambit, again with this Lasker trap preparation. E3, bishop to b4. So as I said, bishop to d2. After d takes e3, your opponent could also try f takes e3. He doesn't have to take, of course, bishop to b4, or he doesn't have to play queen to a4, but still this should be probably much better for you, because again you have this tactic, queen to h4, then after g3 still we can play queen to e4, and now it's pretty much forced everything. Here your opponent has to play queen to f3. Now we can take bishop to d2, and after knight to d2 we can take out this pawn. And notice now, okay, we didn't win the game immediately. You're not going to win the game because you've reached this position, but notice again the structural weakness and also the weak square, the weak pawns in the position. b2 is weak, e3 is weak, c4 is weak. We have a centralized queen. The lack of development is also present, so the queen still has to step back, has to escape from the square in order to liberate the square for the knight that has to be developed. So black is, as I said, probably much better. So that's why white needs to castle here in order to protect the b2 pawn. But notice that even if that happens, the c2 is weak, g1 is weak, so we can many times activate our light square bishop in order to cut off here the potential king's ability to play. So it's really unpleasant now to play the game from white's perspective. So what you do in this types of position, normal development is here perfectly fine. You don't gain maybe so much with this idea, but as I said, it's a pleasant game. I think normal development, knight to f6, queen to f4. Don't trade it off, because if after queen to f4, of course, e takes f4, now basically you have improved your opponent's weakness. When the pawn was in d3, it was a structural weakness. Now after e takes f4, it becomes a very powerful pawn. Now the pawn chain is perfectly fine. In one particular moment, your opponent could also fix then also the pawn structure here with the move b3, and this is probably in the equal game. So you not lose the game because you have taken out the pawn on f4, but now it's something that you should not do. You should not help out your opponent by improving his pawn structure. So after move queen to f4, here I found really a beautiful game. It was played by Tatiana Shumyakina against Alexander Raetsky. Alexander Raetsky here played normal ideas, queen to e7, escape with the queen, protects also his c7 pawn, and has now a comfortable game. Knight to f3, kingside castling, bishop to d3. Now after move knight to g4, he attacked simply the weakness and eventually won the game. So I don't want to show you now the whole game. The point about this video is this Lasker trap idea. After move e3, that's a mistake. We should play simply bishop to b4. We have seen after move knight to d2, the game is really bad because you get simply this one, again some structural weaknesses. After move bishop to d2, we play simply d takes e3, and now if your opponent takes, that's the beautiful Lasker trap with e takes f2, the king that gets deflected. If your opponent plays king to e2, now we should not of course promote to queen, we should promote here to knight, and I guarantee you here a winning game. So really beautiful tactics, but that's only possible if your opponent plays this e3 move, which he'll probably not play. If you reach of course a high level in chess, this is something that happens once in millions of times. So this is something that you should not study so hard, in my opinion. As I said in the beginning of the video, the Lasker the Albin Countergambit is something that you should try to avoid, because in the continuation of our series, first we'll cover the most important tactical shots and the most important traps that are also possible, and then in the continuation of our series we're analyzing some different sidelines and possibilities for both sides. But you will see that white has many times a pleasant game against the Albin Countergambit. So okay, this was our intro video. I hope that you like this trap. It will be added of course into our opening traps in chess video series. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you want to study more about the Queen's Gambit decline, please check out our whole series. We have covered, as I said, many defenses, many potential variations, many potential sidelines that are possible after the first move d4, d5 and c4. Here's also the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best of course.